Everybody, welcome back. I'm Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the support tier list for, I think it's 11-18, the one that just came out this week. It's either 11-18 or 11-19. We're going to look at the support tier list here. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check us out on Twitch every night starting around midnight Eastern Standard Time, usually going until 3 or 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very friendly, chill community. We'd love to see you. Remember, that's only on Twitch now, so we're no longer streaming on YouTube. We're only streaming on Twitch, but we're still going to be releasing videos on YouTube, so be sure to check out the videos as well. So we've got the support tier list here. I'll do an ADC tier list, and then I'll release the patch notes as well. I just know most people want to see the support tier list video. That's all I have time to do tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and get that out there. And then I'll catch up with the patch notes probably tomorrow and the ADC tier list and some other content. So be sure to check all that out. You can follow me also on Twitter at the Strat Prof if you want, the Strategy Professor on Twitter. That way, if you don't get notifications on YouTube or Twitch and you do want to see the content, that's just one extra way you can get notified. I don't post up pictures of food or anything goofy like that. It's just straight up whenever I release content, I just post one tweet about it. That's it. So if you just want extra notifications, then you can do that. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. And I am going to try to make this a bit faster. I know it's always a meme, but we're really going to try to make this 15 to 20 minutes. So I'm just going to focus mostly on what's changed over time and just kind of the big highlights that people might be most interested in on this patch. So Recon, I still think is going to be number one. Statistically, as always, he's around 50%, but he's just so versatile, and that's why I have him there. He can engage in the early game. He does pretty respectable damage. But it's really that mobility that makes Recon, right? Where you can use the mobility to get away from ganks, you can use it to reposition and peel really well for your AD carry to help them get out of dangerous situations. He has a very strong shield that scales really well over time, so it's got a 1.6 AP ratio as well as having a, I think it's a 280 base. It might even be more. I think it's 280. It's 140 for each shield. So a 280 base. And then, of course, his ultimate is very versatile as well. You can use it for movement speed to gap close into a situation. You can use it to CC a bunch of people. So there's just a lot of different applications. And the itemization works really well with him right now, too. Shirelia's is a phenomenal item. There are so many meatball champions that are going to be getting stuff like Gore Drinker, Sterix, you know, those types of champs, your Darius type of champs, and you can just run them all in there with Shirelia's and just run over the enemy team. So, really powerful item in general, and he's probably the best user of Shirelia's right now. And then you can also get Chemtech Putrefier, which is the best Grievous Wounds item, because it's only 2,300 gold, and then it gives you that 60% Grievous, and the baseline stats are really good. I think it's almost 100% efficient, even without the Grievous. It's very strong. If you take Font of Life as the second rune in the Guardian tree, then anytime that you CC someone, if your allies auto attack them, then they get a heal, and that counts as a heal coming from you. That triggers the Putrefier, so pretty much you can give that 60% to your entire team almost permanently in a team fight. So it's very easy to distribute those Grievous Wounds everywhere. It's cheap. He just has really good items, really good engage, good disengage. He can roam well. He can all in and lane. It's almost nothing Rakan can't do. The only downside to Rakan is that he is tricky to play because you have so many different mobility options. Trying to choose the correct sequence of events can be difficult if you don't have a lot of experience on him. And he is very squishy, especially if you build the Putrefier instead of something like a Zeke's. You are going to be really squishy compared to some of the other tank champions. So if you're facing a team that has a ton of CC, then you might be in trouble, especially against some troll counter picks that people sometimes will pick that limit mobility. So, for example, Veigar, Poppy, and perhaps Vex. We'll see. Vex might end up being very good against him as well. So we'll see. So there are some things that are good against him. He's not invulnerable. You know, he still has his limits, but he's a very good blind pick, and he's good in most team compositions. He can find a way to help your team win. Okay, Leona's another one. Now, her win rate has dropped over time, so she's down to about 50.5% win rate. She did get nerfed. Last patch, they dinged her armor a little bit early, 5 off the armor and the magic resist on your W, but she's still going to be super strong overall. She just has so much CC, and the big key to Leona is uptime. All of her stuff is a very low cooldown, right? So that Q, even at level 1, is only 6 seconds for a 1.25 stun. And then her E, you can scale that down to 6 seconds, and that's not including ability haste, right? So when you get decent ability haste on her, if you end up getting something like lock it into Zeke's early, then that's going to give you 40 ability haste. So it's probably going to be much closer to like 4.5 or 5 second cooldown on those things. And then it just allows you to stick to people really well and just keep them locked up, keep them chain stunned. Her ultimate's also on a 90-second cooldown, so you can use it a lot to try to make plays. And the fact that she's really, really tanky in the early game with her W is going to give her a ton of magic resistant armor. Okay, go talk to Mommy. Mommy will find it for you. Will give you a ton of magic resistant armor in the early game. And because it gives you the... Okay, well just wait a second, alright? Will give you a ton of magic resistant armor, and it gives you that flat reduction of like 8 damage in the early game, and I think when you get 1 point into it, it goes to 12 reduction, and that's really, really handy against minions. So when you go for an all-in early, and those, you know, ranged minions are pounding on you, they do a lot less damage to Leona than most other tanks in the bottom lane. So that allows her to go for really aggressive all-ins at level 2 and level 3, and have much more survivability. Speaking of which, all of her abilities go through the minion wave, so she presents a lot more threat than many of the other champions because her E goes through the minions, her ult obviously goes over top, goes through the minions, the Q is just basically an auto attack. So she can go through and threaten anyone, anytime, anywhere, right? And that's very different from someone like a Blitzcrank or a Nautilus who has to look for certain angles to, you know, hit their engage through the minions. So the fact that she can go through everyone is great. The main downside of Leona is that she doesn't have a reverse gear. She goes all the way in. She doesn't pull them to you. She goes to them. So that can put you really far out of position if a counter gank comes in, or if your ADC just doesn't follow up, or if the situation just goes south, she's probably going to die. Similarly, she can't really peel people out of bad situations that well because she's going to go all the way in, versus someone like a Rakan can go in, W, knock somebody up to create that space between the ganker and your AD carry, and then you can E back out to your AD carry. So you just have a lot more options to try to peel with some of the other engaged champs out there. But she is still very, very strong, excellent snowball champion, especially if you pair her together with something like a Tristana. She's still going to be great in this meta. You just want to go lock it and then kind of figure it out from there. Zeke's is a really good choice. Thornmail's a really good choice. There are several different tank options that could be good on her. Okay, and then I have Lulu next. You could easily put Sona there if you want to. And we'll talk about Sona here in a second. But I think that Lulu is just extremely powerful in very specific situations. So particularly if you put her with a hyper carry, something like a Vayne or Twitch, Kog'Maw, Jinx, all of those champions, she buffs them up really, really hard because her W gives that extra like 35% attack speed, and then they also get the on-hit damage from picks, where around level 9 that's going to be 80 damage per auto attack, which is a ton of extra damage. And then she also has the R, which is an infusion of health, so it is not affected by Grievous Wounds, and that's massive because everybody's going to be taking Grievous Wounds. So the R bypasses Grievous, and that just makes her really strong. And then also your W is really good against assassins, and you are starting to see some more assassins coming back into the meta a little bit. They did buff their items a pinch with like Umbral, and I think that they may have buffed Ghostblade a couple of patches ago. So you are starting, and they buffed Fizz specifically this patch. So they are buffing some of the assassins, and she's really good at squishy champions that want to go into melee range because of that polymorph. You know, lock them out for 2.25 seconds. Really good against Echo. And some other champs that rely heavily on mobility. So she's got a lot of value to her. She doesn't scale as well with items as something like a Sona because she doesn't have as much benefit from plus healing and shielding because the R is an infusion of health. It gets around Grievous, but it also doesn't scale really well with things like Moonstone or Mikhail's because it doesn't count as healing, right? So her only shield is just her E. So she's not going to scale as well as Soraka or Sona with kind of the popular, you know, turbo scaling enchanter builds right now, stuff like Moonstone into Mikhail's or Moonstone into Redemption. So she's going to be a little bit worse in the head-to-head matchup against those champs just in terms of raw stats at like 3 items. But I still think that just her ability to empower her allies just allows her to be more aggressive and just have a bit more agency in the game than some of those other champs. So I still think she's very good, although her head-to-head matchup with some of the other popular champs, most notably Sona and Soraka, is going to be a little bit lacking. Okay, Sona, I do have her just a little bit lower. I think she's S class still. She did get nerfed on this patch, so 2 armor got knocked off, which is not a huge deal, but does add up, especially against some of these double AD lanes you might see, like Pyke Draven, that type of thing. And they did fix several bugs that were really good, so her Q was still hitting people in bushes even when she couldn't see them. That's extremely powerful, especially in the laning phase, to help you get those charges, help you get those Spell Thief procs. And then also her E, I believe, was making her immune to slow effects, I think. Or maybe it was the Empowered Cord. I think it was making her immune to slow effects. Maybe not that extreme, but there was something to do with slows in her E. So there were a few different bug fixes. So I still think she's very good. My main problem with Sona is that you just don't have a lot of control over the game. You do have an R, which is good in team fights. It's on a bit of a longer cooldown until you get your passive all the way stacked up, which I still have never done in a game, even in like 35 or 40 minute games. It just takes forever to get all of those stacks, even if you are trying to be aggressive. And just the way the meta is shaking out, like I said, assassins are coming back in a little bit more, and it's really important, I feel like, to have a tank, and preferably a tank that can engage in the bot lane, just because every other lane, a lot of the best champions are going to be carries right now. So you're still seeing things like Xin Zhao being very strong in the jungle. I've seen like Graves in the jungle several times. Kha'Zix is very popular and strong in the jungle. Just all of these heavy damage dealers in the jungle. We're not seeing the Zacs or the Sejuanis. Nunu's like okay, but not as good as he once was. So just having that engage option from the support role is very nice. And then, of course, most of top lane are also your bruiser or your fighter types of champs, your Yasuos, your Yones, Camille's, that type of stuff. So it can just really make your team comp feel a little weird if you don't have engage. And the fact that you don't have that tank that's going to have that armor and that health that scales really well with your plus healing and shielding is a little awkward as well, because your healing is good, but if someone gets one-shotted or just like blown up really hard in the first few seconds, then it's not going to do a lot for you. Especially in a skirmisher style meta where you'll have split pushers and the enemy team just won't let you group as 5 because they'll just put up too much pressure on the side lanes of the map. That can be really awkward for Sona too. If you have to walk through the jungle, trying to rotate to a situation or trying to get wards in a dark place, she can get jumped on and blown up really easily, right? Versus Recon can probably rotate faster and he can probably get away from a lot of those situations, and Leona might be able to survive long enough for help to arrive. So Sona is very, very good if your team can actually force a 5v5 fight, if you can get out of the laning phase and get yourself 2 or 3 items, and you have someone else who can comfortably start a fight, then she is going to be very good. And she does have a 54% win rate, before this patch dropped from the last patch. So I figured just out of respect, I'll put her up there. But I've played her. I started off doing really well on her, but then I think I ended up going like 0-4 this week or something on her when like Recon, I think I don't even remember, 10-5 or something. No, I know that's just me personally, and that's not everybody. But that's just my experience with her. Is she feels squishy, she feels vulnerable. But she is very, very powerful in terms of raw stats. Okay. Last little bit here. And then we have Blitzcrank. I think that he is really good because he preys on a meta that doesn't have a lot of tanks. So when everyone is playing these squishy assassin type of champs, when all of the supports are playing enchanters, then Blitz is going to be really good as long as you can hit those hooks. Most people are not getting the bubble right now. Edge of Night, they're choosing to get other items instead. They're delaying that, if they get it at all, until 3rd or 4th item. So that gives you a lot of opportunities as Blitz to land those hooks. The same thing with Banshee's Veil. People just aren't getting that item as much right now in the meta. And low-key, his shield breaking is actually quite good right now, with Sterix being so strong and giving such an absurd shield. Then being able to immediately remove that shield with your ultimate gives him a lot of extra value. Also removes Locket shield, and of course any enchanter that provides a shield, right? So most notably Lulu usually gives one of the bigger shields. It's just very, very good. And the fact that if he gets a pull on any of those squishy champs at any point in the game, it can completely turn it around. Remember, I've played several games where we did really well against Blitz in the early game, but then just late game, an ally just happens to be walking up mid lane when we have Baron or something and they're not careful, and then, Blitz just hooks somebody over a random wall, they die, and it just kills your entire push. Or sometimes they can even turn it around depending on how much movement speed they have. If they pull someone over the wall and then they have someone else who can run down and force a fight like a Camille and lock somebody else up, they might just be able to turn around and win the game. So it's just that hook always has power. Nothing else in his kit really scales super well with the items that he gets, but when there's no tanks, when no one can soak those hooks, and when you can control vision with Blitz, he's actually quite strong. So I think he is good. Now, I haven't tried like building Umbral on him, but I've thought that would be an interesting choice just for even better vision control and just because your items don't really matter that much. So Umbral could be a decent choice. You will be squishier, but at the same time, you shouldn't really be running in, getting hit by a lot of things as Blitzcrank anyways, because you pull them so far out of position. You have so much range that usually when you pull them in, they're just dead. And you don't have any risk if you miss it, in the sense of they can't immediately run in and kill you typically, because it's from so far away. So anyways, I haven't seen a lot of other people doing that, but that's just something I'll throw out there that you could tinker around with if you want that could be interesting. Going Umbral is maybe like a second item on Blitzcrank, just because he usually only gets like Zeeks, which doesn't matter that much because they die anyways in one shot, so the extra damage doesn't matter. Or like Knight's Vow, again, is okay, but it's not phenomenal. So Umbral with the new cheaper price tag of $2,400 could be interesting. And I mean, his E, I think it is, the thing that like punches people and knocks them up, does scale off of AD and does a decent amount of damage. So the lethality is like not completely wasted, although admittedly it is a little weird. You're mostly just getting it as an extra sweeper with zombie wards to help you control that vision and find better opportunities for hooks. Okay, last couple here. We have Soraka. Soraka is still going to be pretty good. She's getting nerfed harder than Sona on this patch. 20 health off of her ultimate is going to be a very big deal because that baseline health influences how much the scaling works on her plus healing and shielding, as well as the scaling on her ultimate itself. Remember, whenever someone's below 40% health, I think it does like 50% more healing. And so when you lower the base number by 20, then you're getting less on the back end. So you would have gotten 40 extra healing, but then if you... or you're losing 30, basically, is what I'm trying to say on that. But then when you also calculate in the fact that she's probably going to be going Moonstone, she's probably going to be going Mikhail's or Redemption, you know, that's an extra 50% plus healing and shielding that's not going to be modified by that. And the fact that it affects 5 different people every time you ult, it's a big deal. It's a big nerf. But I still think that she can be pretty good as long as you don't die. If you land a lot of Qs in the laning phase, she can be pretty impressive. It's very cheap mana-wise. It can actually be used to wave clear and push as well if you have something like a Caitlyn or a Sivir and you just want to put them under tower and just keep chucking Qs at them. And she does have some phenomenal sustain. She just doesn't have a lot of CC versus Sona's going to have that ultimate at least to help you out a bit. And she's still going to be pretty squishy. If you do want to play her, I would highly suggest going something like Barrier and potentially Guardian. I would go Barrier on Sona, but I would keep the Airy just because it's so easy to proc Airy in the laning phase. But with Soraka, because there's no guarantee you're going to hit those Qs, I would probably just go Guardian, and you get so much mileage out of Font of Life as well because your Q does apply that slow, which again is going to spread out any sort of buff items that you want to get, whether it's Staff of Flowing Water, Ardent Censer, or the debuffing item Putrefier. You don't always get those, but that's at least an option that works better if you do have Font. So I think that kind of the Guardian plus Barrier is a good option on Soraka, although Airy is fine too. But you definitely want Ulti Hunter because her ability is so powerful. That ability is so strong, and it's global. It's map-wide, so you can influence top lane fights, mid lane fights, jungle versus jungle fights. You just really, really want as many ultimates as you can get. So that's Soraka. I think she'll still be good. She's obviously going to continue to have a hard time against hard engaged champs like Blitzcrank, like Leona. There are not going to be a lot of other champs out there that are going to be able to soak those hits or create that little bit of resistance to them just running at you because everybody's going to be squishy. So it is kind of rough. And like Sona, it is very hard in a skirmisher meta when you're trying to rotate from lane to lane. But nevertheless, I still think she can be very strong if left unchecked. I think that Braum is still pretty good as well. Overall, I have been playing him a bit more. Not a lot changed meta-wise, but if people are playing more of these tanks to try to counter the enchanters, if you are seeing stuff like Leona, Nautilus, I played him into a Mumu, and I thought that that was actually quite strong. Especially if they're trying something like an Amumu plus Misfortune combo. I think it can be pretty good. So Braum's okay. I still think he's going to be pretty good, especially in pro play, but even in solo queue. Nautilus, Still pretty strong overall. Not a lot changed here. Has that guaranteed ult for the knockup. Has a little bit more versatility with his hook because he can use it to rotate around the map faster or to get away from ganks. But overall, he's just going to be a little bit less tanky. He has lower baseline armor at 36 instead of 44 on Braum, 44 on Blitz, 44 on Leona. So he is going to be one of the lower armor tanks out there. But he does have very good wave clear with his E if you can manage the mana properly. So that does allow you to get that push for preferable back timings, preferable roams, dragon timings, all that stuff. So he is still good. He's just going to be a bit squishier. His W is kind of lame as far as a defensive steroid, but overall, going to be a really strong champion, especially if they have a lot of mobility because they can't get away from the missile. And one of the last couple that I'll talk about here, I know I've said that a couple of times, but we do have to go ahead and end this, is a Mumu, and it's probably the most controversial place that I have him here on A, I think, when a lot of people might put him on S. I've played him several times. He does do a lot of damage in the early game if you land both bandages and if your AD carry opts into the all-ins. But I've found that as you kind of level up, he falls off a bit just because it is fairly easy to dodge those Qs. It's a really slender hitbox. And it's a really long cooldown. It's like 13 seconds. You can store up 2 of them. It has a 3-second delay between the 2 charges. But really, that's his only gap closer. And his other 2 main abilities feel really lackluster. Like the W basically doesn't do anything later in the game. And then his E just... it does some damage, but unless people are focus firing you and trying to, shoot you down, it just doesn't really do a ton. Your ultimate obviously is going to be really strong if you get it. It is on a long cooldown, but it is quite nice. And that debuff is good if you have a bunch of AP on your team. Having that extra 10% true damage from your passive, I think it's like Curse of the Sad Mummy. That might be his ultimate name. I don't remember. But anyways, his passive does do that extra damage. The problem is almost everybody's going AD. Mages seem to be really bad in this meta overall, especially in solo queue. So you're even seeing AD middle and AD top, and half the time AD jungle. So it is cool that he's an AP option as a tank, but you don't really gain a lot out of that passive unless you have other magic users on your team. So that can be a little rough. So he's okay. I just think he doesn't have quite as much CC, and he has longer cooldowns built into his kit. His defensive steroid is fairly weak as the game goes on. It only blocks physical damage, and it's about half as much as Leona. So he definitely can work. I can respect it. The ult is strong. The all-in potential is strong in the first 5 levels or so if you land both of your Qs. And he does have a high win rate. So it's mostly, I have him here out of respect just for the win rate. If he didn't have a 53% win rate or whatever it is, I wouldn't have him here. I'd probably have him in B. But he's okay. It's an interesting flavor of the month pick. I think it's cool. I don't think we're going to see it a ton at Worlds. I could be wrong about that. In solo queue, it's all right. But I'd still rather be playing other champs. Seraphine is another notable one that I'll say here. She did get her ult buffed. Watch out for her. She could still be really good. I think it's more likely she's going to get played in the mid lane if she gets played at all. But nevertheless, for the same reasons that Sona and Soraka are pretty good, I think Seraphine's good, just that she's great with kind of the Moonstone Redemption or Moonstone Mikhails. She doesn't have as much sustained, just raw healing as they do, but her ultimate is much more impactful. It's a massive hitbox and completely can turn around fights by herself. And she does provide pretty good wave clear as well with her Q. She's pretty strong. And then Vex will be the last one that I'll talk about here, and then we'll call it a day. I'm not really sure. I do think that Vex is going to be better than I thought she was after reading the numbers. She does have a pretty short cooldown. I was looking at it right here. I thought this might be longer, but it reduces it by 25% whenever you trigger Gloom on people. So you only have to trigger it 4 times to get an extra stun, or an extra fear rather. And it's a pretty long time. At level 6, it's 1 second. And you can apply it AoE to different people with various abilities. So I'll just have to see her in action against opponents of a similar level. I know there are some PBE ones, but it's usually Masters people versus Silver people. So, and carefully selected footage to make it look really OP. So we'll see. But I just need to see it in action. I do think that during the first week, a lot of people will probably be bad with her. So that's why I have her in C tier. So in a couple of weeks, if people can find good builds on her and really figure out how to optimize her rotations, I could definitely see her maybe moving up into B. It's possible that could happen on this patch, but I think because she's so tricky and has a different playstyle from a lot of other champs, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of guaranteed easy power. You're going to have to earn it with her. I think she's going to be fairly high skill cap, and it doesn't seem like there are fantastic items on her. Mandate's probably good, but as a support at least, it's hard to get stuff like demonic. You can do it, but it's kind of running into like the Zyra brand problem where if you try to go that route, it's really expensive. You need to get ahead early, but she's hard to play. So I don't think a lot of people are going to get ahead early on her. So we'll see. I've got her in B. She could very easily deserve to be C or D. It's just an unknown. So I think that she has the potential to maybe be strong, but I just don't think it's going to happen on this patch. Okay. Well, that's going to be it. Thank you very much for tuning in. As always, I appreciate it. Pyke has been trending up. New Umbral is good for Pyke. Thresh, still really good if you can hit everything. But I think his matchups into a lot of these champs have become a lot more rough. But yeah, that's going to be it. Have a good day. Let me know what you think about this shorter format. I just really wanted to get this content in, and I got to go. I got to get some other stuff done. But I did want to get the video out for you today. So be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Come by, check out the stream. Usually starts around 12 or 12:30 every night. Only on Twitch, no YouTube. YouTube is only going to be the standalone videos like this. And thanks. I'll see you next time. Have a good day.